My wife of 10 years forged my signature on a $500, $0 property deed and then claimed I abandoned her during our bankruptcy. Now she's suing me for half the estate. I never saw it coming. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife of 10 years turned out to be a total cheating bitch. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about her, but it turns out I was blind. The worst part. It all came crashing down in a way I never saw coming, like a lightning strike out of nowhere. One day, I was just living my normal life, and the next, I found out she'd been lying to me about everything, including her fidelity and her money. Her name's Lisa. She's been my wife since we were in our late 20s. We met in college, got married right after, and for the most part I thought we had a good life. We weren't filthy rich, but we managed, made a decent living, and had 2 kids I loved more than anything. But I always felt like there was something off lately, little things that didn't add up. She'd be secretive about her phone, hide her texts, and I caught her lying about where she was going sometimes. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe she was just stressed or tired. We had our fights, sure, but nothing major enough to suspect she'd go behind my back. Then a few weeks ago, I started noticing odd things. Her phone kept pinging late at night and she'd get defensive if I asked who she was texting. I saw a strange number pop up on the bill, and when I looked at the messages, my stomach dropped. It was clear she'd been talking to some guy. I don't even remember his name, but the texts were all about meeting up, sneaky plans, and even some explicit stuff. I won't lie, it hit me like a punch in the gut. I felt betrayed, furious, and sick all at once. But that wasn't the worst part. I decided to dig a little deeper just to see if I was overreacting. I started snooping through her emails, her social media accounts, and her bank statements. That's when I found something that made my blood run cold. A series of transactions and legal documents that made no sense. Turns out she'd been forging my signature on a property deed valued at over $500,000. She transferred the ownership to herself, or so she claimed during our bankruptcy. I never signed anything, I never authorized it. And the thing is, she's now claiming I abandoned her during the bankruptcy process, trying to take half the estate. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This woman, my wife, had been lying to me for months, maybe even longer. She'd been cheating on me with some guy, lying about her whereabouts, and now she was trying to steal what was supposed to be our future. And the worst part, she told me she was doing all this for us, that she was just trying to protect our family. Yeah, right. I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. I remember sitting alone in the living room, staring at the evidence spread out on my laptop screen. My mind was racing. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face, cheat on me, and then try to screw me over legally? I'd always been the one working hard, trying to keep everything afloat while she was out there screwing around and secretly siphoning money. I felt so betrayed, so stupid for not seeing it sooner. The trust I had in her was shattered, and I knew I had to do something. I just didn't know what yet. All I knew was that I wasn't going to let her get away with this, not without a fight. After I found out about the forged deed and her affair, I was in a state of shock, but also a boiling rage I couldn't contain. I couldn't believe how deep her lies ran, how she'd manipulated everything for her own benefit. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I just needed answers, and I needed to hear her admit it, even if I already knew the truth deep down. The night I confronted her, I waited until she got home from her day out. She always acts like she's so busy, so important, like she's too busy for us. But I knew she'd been out with her new guy, some guy from her office, I later found out. She walked in, all bitchy attitude, and I just cut straight to the point. I pulled out the bank statements, the messages, the legal documents. I looked her dead in the eyes and asked, "Lisa, what the hell is going on? Who is this guy and what did you do with that property deed?" She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and gave me that fake, innocent look she's perfected over the years. "Oh, come on, you're overreacting. It's just a mistake. I was trying to protect us during the bankruptcy. You don't understand the pressure I was under." She brushed past me, acting like I was the crazy one, but I wasn't buying it. I pressed her harder, demanding she tell me the truth. That's when she started lying even more, saying she never forged my signature, that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was just paranoid. That moment was like a switch flipping inside me. I realized I was dealing with a dishonest, manipulative woman who'd been betraying me for months. My stomach sank, but my mind sharpened. I saw through her act. I told her I knew about the affair, about the forgery, about everything. She looked stunned for a second, then her bitchy mask slipped into full-on defensive mode. She started yelling, calling me paranoid, saying I was crazy, that I was ruining everything. It was like watching a different person, someone I didn't even recognize. The emotional impact hit me hard. I felt a mix of heartbreak, anger, and disgust. I'd built my life around her, trusted her with everything, and she'd been secretly screwing around and trying to steal from me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and sick. I'd always believed in honesty and loyalty, and now I saw how fragile that trust really was. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about a cheating wife anymore. It was about her trying to take what I'd worked for and her lying to my face while doing it. I knew I couldn't just walk away from this, not without fighting. I told her I was going to get legal help, that I'd expose everything, and that she'd have to answer for her lies. She kept crying, trying to manipulate me, saying I was overreacting, that she loved me, that it was all a mistake. But I wasn't buying her tears. I saw her for what she was. A selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted, even if it meant destroying our family. That night I sat alone in my office, staring at the screen with all the evidence laid out. My mind was racing with questions and plans. I couldn't sleep, and I knew I had to act fast. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I'd lost everything I cared about. But deep down, I knew I had to stand up for myself. I couldn't let her get away with this. I had to fight back, not just for the money or the property, but for my dignity, for the life I thought I was building with her. The betrayal cut deep, and I wasn't going to let her win. Not without a fight. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and trying to process what had just happened. I spent every spare minute talking to a lawyer, gathering more evidence, and trying to figure out exactly how deep her deception went. The more I dug, the more I realized how carefully she'd planned everything. She forged my signature on that property deed, transferred ownership without my knowledge, and then had the audacity to claim I'd abandoned her during bankruptcy, all while sneaking around with her new guy. I couldn't believe I'd been blind for so long. I thought we had a good life, that we were solid. Turns out she'd been playing me the entire time. It's like she was living a double life, one where she was the perfect wife, and another where she was scheming behind my back. And the thing that made me angriest was how she'd lied so easily, spun her web of bullshit, and then tried to manipulate me into thinking I was the crazy one. So I made a decision. I was done playing nice. I wanted to hit her where it hurt, financially and emotionally. I decided I'd confront her again, but this time with a plan. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some pushover. I was going to take back what she'd stolen, and I was going to make her pay for all the lies. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you don't let a cheating wife walk all over you, especially when she's also trying to steal your future. I set up a meeting at a neutral place, a quiet coffee shop downtown. I told her I had something important to discuss and I wanted to hear her side. She showed up looking smug, like she thought she had everything under control. But I was calm, cold even. I laid out all the evidence I'd collected, the forged signatures, the bank transactions, the texts with her lover. I told her I knew about the affair, about the property scam, and that I was going to take legal action. Her reaction was classic. She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and started to deny everything. "You're crazy," she said. "You're just jealous. I never did any of that. You're imagining things." She tried to blame it on stress, on her feeling overwhelmed, and even accused me of neglecting her. But I wasn't buying her act anymore. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her I'd already talked to a lawyer, that I was filing for divorce, and that she'd be held accountable for everything she'd done. That's when she lost it. Her face twisted with anger, and she started yelling at me, calling me a controlling bastard, saying I was ruining her life. She said I was just mad because I got caught. She claimed I was the one cheating, that I was the one who'd abandoned her, and that she only did what she did to protect us. I just sat there, listening to her bullshit, feeling a mixture of disgust and relief. because deep down I knew I was finally getting out of this nightmare. That meeting was a turning point. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. I was done being the nice guy, the one who turned a blind eye to her manipulations. I told her I was moving forward, that I'd get a divorce, and that she'd have to face the consequences. I wasn't going to let her destroy what was left of my life with her lies and her greed. After she stormed off, I sat alone again, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. I knew this wasn't going to be easy: divorce, legal battles, the emotional fallout. But I also knew I had to do it. I couldn't keep living in her shadow, wondering what other secrets she was hiding. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, and now I had to pick up the pieces and rebuild. The trust was gone, but I was determined to get justice and move on. Whatever happened next, I knew I'd never let someone like her manipulate me again. The aftermath of that meeting was like waking up from a bad dream, but the reality hit hard. I hired a lawyer who specialized in property fraud and family law, because I knew this wasn't just about a messy affair. It was about protecting what little I had left. The lawyer told me to gather every piece of evidence I could find, so I spent the next week digging through bank statements, emails, and legal documents. Every new piece of information felt like another punch in the gut, but I knew I had to keep going. One thing I couldn't ignore was how she continued to lie and spin her stories. She kept insisting her innocence, claiming she never forged my signature and that I was just paranoid. She even had the nerve to call me during this time, crying and saying she loved me, that she was trying to protect us, and that I was ruining everything for no reason. That was the moment I realized how deeply she'd manipulated me. She was good at it, the kind of person who can lie with a smile on her face and make you doubt your own judgment. I started to see her for what she really was, a selfish, scheming woman who'd do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying her own family. I also uncovered more about her affair, the guy she'd been with. Turns out he was married too, and he was using her just as much as she was using him. That made me feel even more disgusted. I'd been blind to her lies, but now I saw the full picture. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was betraying everything we stood for, and she was trying to steal my future in the process. The legal battle was about to begin. I filed for divorce, and at the same time, I started the process of contesting the property transfer. I knew it wouldn't be easy, especially with her trying to claim I'd abandoned her during bankruptcy. The lawyer explained that she'd probably try to spin her story in court, but with all the evidence I had, I felt confident. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. I'd trusted her for so long, and now I was fighting to keep what was rightfully mine. Meanwhile, the emotional toll was heavy. I felt like I was losing my mind some days. I'd go from furious to devastated and back again. I'd ask myself over and over, how could she do this? How could someone I loved so much turn out to be so manipulative and deceitful? I kept replaying all the good times, all the moments I thought were real, and it made me feel sick. I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. I wondered if I was just a fool for believing in her at all. But I also knew I couldn't let her win. I had to stay strong, for myself and my kids. The thought of losing everything she tried to steal made me sick, but I promised myself that I'd fight with everything I had. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my life, my money, or my dignity, even if it meant a long, painful court battle. I was prepared for it. I'd come too far to give up now. The betrayal had cut so deep, but I was determined to come out of this with some sense of justice, no matter what it took. The court date finally arrived after months of legal back and forth. I remember feeling a strange mix of anxiety and relief. I knew I had the evidence, the truth on my side, but I also knew how manipulative Lisa could be when she was cornered. She showed up looking like she just stepped out of a soap opera, all fake tears, exaggerated expressions, and that bitchy smirk that she thought made her look innocent. I didn't buy it for a second. The courtroom was tense. My lawyer laid out all the evidence: forged signatures, the suspicious property transfer, her texts with her lover, and her inconsistent stories. She tried to deny everything, claiming I was a jealous, paranoid husband who was just trying to control her. She said she'd only been trying to protect us, that she'd never cheat or steal anything. But I knew better. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, and it was clear he saw through her. What surprised me most was her attitude when the judge asked her directly about the forgery. She looked right into the court and lied straight-faced, claiming she had no idea how the signatures got on those documents. She insisted she'd never betrayed me, never cheated, and never tried to steal our property. Her voice was steady, but her eyes flickered with guilt. I could see the cracks in her story. It was almost satisfying to watch her try to spin her web of lies in front of everyone. When it was my turn to speak, I laid everything out calmly but firmly. I explained how she'd been lying, cheating, and scheming behind my back. I told the court about the affair, the forged documents, and her attempt to claim half our estate. I emphasized how I dedicated my life to building our family, only to be betrayed by the woman I trusted most. I could see some nodding in agreement from the judge, and that gave me hope. By the end of the hearing, it was clear that the judge was leaning heavily in my favor. He ordered her to return the property deed, stop all claims to the estate, and pay damages for the forgery. He also granted the divorce, finally putting an end to what had become a nightmare. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders, but I also knew this wasn't the end. The emotional scars would take longer to heal. As I left the courtroom, I looked back at her sitting there, her face a mix of anger and defeat. I felt nothing but relief. I knew I'd done what I needed to do to protect myself and my kids. I also realized how much anger and heartbreak I'd been holding in. I'd been naive, trusting her for too long, but now I saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd betrayed everything we'd ever built. I promised myself I wouldn't let her define my future. I'd start over, rebuild my life, and finally put this chapter behind me. Because at the end of the day, the truth always comes out, and I was finally free to move on. After the court's decision, life didn't suddenly become easy, but it felt like a huge weight had been lifted. I moved out of the house she'd tried to manipulate and steal from me. It was strange, walking away from a place I once thought was our home, knowing that everything inside was tainted with her lies. I rented a small apartment nearby, just enough to start fresh, and focused on rebuilding my life from scratch. The kids stayed with me most of the time, and I made sure they knew I was there for them, that I was still their dad, still their safe place, even if everything else was falling apart. That period was brutal. I felt betrayed, angry, and broken inside. But I also learned something crucial. Trust is fragile, and it's earned through honesty and loyalty, things Lisa had completely lost. I realized I'd been too trusting, too quick to believe the best in someone who had been secretly planning her own version of the life we wanted. I questioned everything I'd ever known about relationships, about myself, and about how to recognize red flags before they turn into disasters. In the end, I decided to focus on my kids and myself. I threw myself into work, took up new hobbies, and started therapy to deal with all the emotional fallout. It wasn't easy, but I knew I had to heal, not just physically or financially, but emotionally. I couldn't let her betrayal define me, even if she tried to destroy everything I cared about. I learned that revenge isn't about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming your peace, your integrity, and your dignity. Looking back, I realized that the biggest lesson I learned was about the importance of boundaries and listening to your gut. I ignored warning signs for too long, convincing myself she was just stressed or busy. But beneath her bitchy attitude and lies, there was a pattern I should have seen sooner. Now I trust myself more than ever. I know what red flags look like, and I know I won't let anyone manipulate me again. To anyone out there going through something similar, I'll say this: don't ignore the signs. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't let fear or love blind you to the truth. And when betrayal happens, don't be afraid to fight for your money, your dignity, and your future. It's hard, and it hurts like hell, but in the end, truth and integrity will always win. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity and strength I never knew I had. And that's worth more than all the money or property in the world.